Steam Next Fest started on February 21st and ended on the 28th. During this time, loads of developers opened demos and launched live streams of their upcoming games. This is a great time for indie devs to get their games out to the masses and hopefully get critical feedback needed to ensure that their game can be as good as it possibly can be upon release. There were literally hundreds of games that were available to try out during this time, and admittedly I was unable to get to as many as I would have liked to, but I wanted to use an episode of Demo Diving to go over 4 of the games that I was either super excited about or I thought stood out for various reasons. I'd like to be able to do this sort of thing in the future, and if you would like to see me cover more upcoming games, please subscribe and leave a like on the video so I may be able to grow my channel. Without any further ado, and in no particular order, let's get into the 4 games I want to talk about from Steam Next Fest 2022. Batora Lost Haven was the game I was looking forward to most with Steam Next Fest. Being published by Team 17 and running on the Unreal Engine, my hopes and expectations were high for this story-driven RPG. I may have had my expectations a bit too high for this game, as it ended up being a pretty disappointing experience. The combat is good enough, and the stance switching is a nice change from monotonous button mashing, but what really hampers this game is the story. And for a game that's heavily story-based, that kinda seems to be a bit of a problem. Everything just seems very bland and generic, while all being delivered through mostly questionable voice acting.
Take Sheila somewhere safe, I beg you!
And by bland storytelling, I mean there's a section that you're playing that has a friendly side called the Builders, and the enemy side called the Destroyers. The decisions you make boil down to generic good choice or bad choice options, and let's face it, we are way beyond the idea of video games presenting this trope. I'm not saying all games should be the gray morality, but presenting 2 options that are obviously laced with good or evil is a bit overplayed and really does little to make the player feel like they have any control.
I forgive you. You're just another victim, just like us.
Unfortunately, I wasn't thrilled with my time in the game, and as such, at least for the time being, Batora Lost Haven is not a game I can recommend. Going from a game I was excited for that disappointed me to a game I knew nothing about and blew me away, let's talk about The Iron Oath. Developed by Curious Panda Games and published by Humble Games, The Iron Oath asks, what if there was a game set in the world like D&D where you had to manage time and relations with nations during the end of the world while also dealing with a grueling dungeon diving aspect? Seriously, time as a resource is both amazing and infuriating. Here, let me give you an example. So you find yourself in a cavern system trying to escape. Do you blindly charge ahead not knowing what lurks in the shadows, leaving yourself vulnerable for an ambush? Or do you scout ahead so you know what's ahead, only to use up time that then makes the rest of the progression much harder? These are some of the decisions you make while you're playing, and I kept feeling like I was playing a more in-depth Darkest Dungeon, or the turn-based equivalent of a Dark Souls game. I never felt like I was ever ahead, and while that can be off-putting to many players, it's done in such a well-designed way that you can't really call it unfair. There's mechanics that balance everything out and gives the game a very enjoyable experience. This game is set to release sometime in the spring of 2022, and I definitely think you should take a look at it if you like these types of challenges.
Friend making time.
Playing as the good guys trying to stop the end of the world can feel like a chore, and that's where the Unliving comes into play. Another game being published by Team 17, The Unliving sees you play as a necromancer in a roguelite action RPG, where those who you kill become your servants. I will go ahead and say that this is a game that I'm still on the fence about. I like the overall aesthetic and the feel of the game. It reminds me of the old Overlord games if they were missing their slapstick humor but were set in a Diablo-like setting. It's a very straightforward style of gameplay, and I believe the potential of unlocking new abilities will help keep the game fresh, but my biggest point of contention comes from the AI of your loyal followers. When you command your forces to attack, I feel like that should remove some responsibility from you, which should free yourself to manage your own character. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. Too many times I clicked on an enemy only to realize that after that specific enemy died, my army would just stand there while being attacked. This made me have to split my attention between attacking and dodging incoming attacks, and micromanaging a huge blob attacking an enemy one by one. Also, the fact that I couldn't raise any more dead unless the entire grouping of humans were killed inevitably led me to chasing down one last guy and then stumbling into another group before I could recoup my losses. I do like this game, but I hope these issues can be addressed because this game has potential to be a really fun, chaotic game, as long as everything falls into place.
The Earth, our home, she is unique. Held in its bosom are the ingredients of evolution.
Speaking of having everything fall into place, let's talk about Ixion. Developed by Bulwark Studios, whose previous works include the hit turn-based strategy game Warhammer 40,000 Mechanicus, Ixion takes place on a space station called the Tycoon. Wait a second. Did they really name it Tycoon and then just make it a fancy spelling? Alright, well, considering there were about 35 games listed under the Business Simulation Video Games page between the years of 2017 to now, compared to the approximate 30 that released in 2003 alone, I just honestly thought that genre had died out. However, if the Tycoon games that stick around are like Ixion, I may have to find some time to work them into my play schedule. This game manages simplicity and complexity in a very intuitive way, so I don't feel like I'm just doing things to do them. Instead, I feel like I'm doing a somewhat decent job at managing a space station as it voyages towards the future of humanity. The voice acting, although sometimes a bit too long-winded, is done very well.
Before you do so, Vanir Dolos, Marduk Council founder and Dolos CEO, wants to talk to you.
Hello, Administrator. I'm glad to see that you have managed to complete your assignments in preparation for this unique moment in history. You must understand that this is not simply another chapter in humanity's story. The book of our life on Earth is over, and we stand now at its epilogue.
And I thoroughly enjoyed the prologue of the game, even if, spoiler alert, we did doom humanity upon our departure. Luckily, we don't have anyone rich enough with aspirations into space who could try to force all of humanity to follow their vision and in turn have them praise them as some sort of deity. By the end of Next Fest, I got to play about 20 to 30 games, and while there were some that I thought were honestly a bit baffling, there were a lot of good games out there. There are two games that I'd like to give an honorable mention to. The first is The Wandering Village. I didn't include it because it's just another Tycoon-style game, and while it was good, I felt like I enjoyed my time with Ixion just a slight bit more, probably due to my personal preference for the sci-fi genre. The other game I'd like to give a shout out to is Ozymandias. I don't really want to talk about it all that much because I may make a video in the future specifically for this game, but I will say that having a Civ-like game taking place during the literal beginning of civilizations is a very interesting take on the standard turn-based sim games. I do wish I got a chance to play more games, and there are still some games that have their demos available for download. I may try out a handful more games and do another montage of reviews like this video, so let me know in the comments if this is something you'd like to see me do again in the future. But that will be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and as always, be kind to one another. Shout out to my Patreon supporters Relativity, Naughty Dog is King, and Rhonda, Aaron's mom, Proctor. If you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, the link is in the description, as well as a link to my free Discord server.